There's a smell this hall gets in winter. Not unpleasant, just specific. Something between the cold that comes in off the street on the coats and the warmth of the radiators that have been on since early afternoon. Damp wool drying. Old wood. The particular quality of air that a room gets when people have been in it a long time, breathing and moving and being warm together. Nobody's mentioned it. Nobody ever does. It's just there. The smell of this specific place on this kind of evening in this season. And it's been landing on people when they walk through that door since the plaster was first dry. None of that travels through a screen. The screen has two channels, what you see and what you hear. Both of them turned up as loud as they can go. The rest of it, the smell of somewhere, the specific temperature of a room, the way the air changes when a door opens and 15 degrees of winter comes in briefly and then doesn't. None of that has ever found a way through. It isn't there, and it isn't missed. And that's the most interesting thing about it. There was a conversation in this room last week. Two people in the far corner. It started, as conversations often do, on something ordinary. The kind of opener that's really just an agreement to be in the room together for a bit. And then one of them said something slightly more true than they'd expected to say. The other received it properly, without waiting for the gap to climb into. And then the first one went a little further, because they'd been received well. And so on, until they were somewhere neither of them had planned to be. At one point, something came out of the first person's mouth that stopped them briefly. Not because it was wrong, because it was right, and it had arrived before they'd had time to decide whether to say it. They paused, said, quietly, half to themselves, "I've never actually thought about it like that before," and meant it. The thought had formed in the room through the contact with another person, in a form it could only have taken on that particular evening with those two people. That doesn't happen in the other room. Not because the other room isn't capable of warmth or depth. It is in its way. But in the other room, even in the most private exchange, there's always a version of composing. Deciding what to give, choosing the form it takes. The friction of two people actually in a room together, the face doing something unexpected, the pause that lands differently than expected. That friction isn't a flaw. It's what makes the thing that comes out of it real. There's a silence in this room that I want to try to describe. Not the silence of discomfort, though I know that one too. The other kind. The silence between people who've been in enough rooms together that they don't need to fill it. Two people at the corner table who've run out of things to say in the way that means they've covered everything that needed covering and are now just here, together, in the same room, breathing the same air. It doesn't look like much from the outside. It looks like two people sitting quietly. But I've watched it long enough to know it's one of the rarer things a room like this produces. And the other room can't produce it. Not because it doesn't have quiet, but because it was built to fill every silence before it can be anything. This kind of silence needs to be allowed to last. It requires nothing. It just requires the willingness to be in a room and let it be. There's a laugh I've heard in this room that I want to try to describe. Not the polite kind, the short one that comes out on time, correctly spaced, performing amusement. The other kind, the one that arrives before the person had a chance to decide whether to let it. The kind that comes out of the chest rather than just the throat, and travels through the air and lands somewhere in the body of the person who caused it, not just in their ears. It happens here. When something is genuinely funny rather than just flagged as funny. When the timing is physical and the look on a face is real, and the thing that was funny was only funny in exactly that form, with those people in that moment. Unrepeatable, unable to be reconstructed or forwarded without losing the thing that made it the thing it was. The other room has laughter. I won't pretend otherwise. But it travels differently. The mark that says something was funny, the word that says something was funny. None of it the laugh that lands in the chest. I want to say something about hands. The hand on the arm. I described it early in this series. The unreflective, first response kind of kindness. The one that arrives before the hesitation. I've watched it happen in this room more times than I can account for. One person's hand on another person's arm, briefly. Two nervous systems in the same space, in actual contact. There's nothing in the other room that does what that does. The other room is warm in its way, and I've said so, and I mean it. But warmth across a distance is a different thing from warmth in the same room. The hand on the arm only happens when two people are actually here. Not half present in the other room, not composing, not curating, just here, with their whole bodies in the same air, able to reach each other. That turns out to be quite a specific thing, the kind that only happens in rooms. The real world still moves at the speed it has always moved, slower than the feed, slower than the notification and the scroll and the thing that arrives before the last thing has finished landing, slower than the pace the other room has taught some people to expect, so that sitting with someone who's finding their words can feel sometimes like more patience than the day has left in it. But that slowness isn't a flaw in the room. The slowness is the whole of it. The conversation that goes somewhere unexpected, the silence that's valuable, the laugh that lands in the chest, the hand on the arm. All of it requires the slowness. None of it can be sped up. It arrives at the pace of a room with actual people in it on a specific evening that will only ever happen once. Wonder requires it. The held moment, the thing you stayed with long enough for it to open, has always moved at this speed. The other room was never designed to show you how good that is. It was designed, in fact, to make the real world look insufficient, to keep attention half elsewhere, so that what's here never quite gets the full weight of a person's presence. But the room they keep checking to see if they're missing something, it's this one. There's a coat on my hook tonight, a heavy one, the serious kind people bring out when the weather means it. It's been through rain and got dry again and been through rains since. The lining is starting to go at the left pocket, where a hand has been going in and out for a few years more than lining is generally designed for. There's a loose button held on by thread that has no business still holding. I know this coat. I know the person it belongs to. And when they came through that door tonight, the coat told me something no screen could have. The specific shape of a winter being lived in. The texture of a life carried through actual weather. They're in the room now. The conversation that nobody planned is finding its way somewhere. The air is warm and shared, and smells of what it's always smelled of in here, on this kind of evening, in this season. It was here before the other room existed. It'll be here long after the other room has changed into whatever comes next. And it doesn't compete with anything. It never needed to. It just waits for the coat to come off the hook, for the person to actually arrive, for the room to do what rooms have always done. It was always here. for anyone who was here too. I'll still be here when you get back.